All right. Who is this guy? He's scary, man. Dude, you don't know if he's smiling. You don't even know if he has a goddamn mouth. He's just got a hair face. He's got a bunch of medals. His name is John Philip Sousa. John Philip Sousa was a Taylor Swift of the late 1800s. Everybody loved his music. He wrote waltzes. He was a composer. He wrote waltzes and marches and shit like that. And the way that people primarily consumed his music was they buy his sheet music and they'd go home and people were musical and they'd play his music and gather around the piano and sing some songs together as a family or whatever. And he hated these two machines that came out around the late 1800s. The first would be the player piano and the other would be the the gramophone or the Edison phonograph or whatever, basically the turntable. He didn't like this because with the player piano, you put in a roll, and the roll would replay John Philip Sousa's music, and he didn't get paid for it. And he's like, hey! And the same with the phonograph. When the early recording industry came out, they didn't have no content. They didn't have no Taylor Swifts. They had John Philip Sousa's. And what they did is they got his sheet music and they had a band record his music, and then they sold those on, disc or rolls. And so he was bitter about this. He wasn't getting paid. So he was mad about that. But he was really mad about something else. He thought that the production of music would go from people being musical, again, using consumption as a starting point of production. That is, they'd buy sheet music and they'd make music, and they were musical. And he did not like the fact that basically we would become consumers of professional culture, that professional musicians and record labels would be the only ones that would make music and culture. And guess what? He was goddamn right. Most of the 1900s, everything was made by professionals and corporations and was sold to us peons at the bottom end of the chain, and because of this, because making music and creating music became more professionalized, it was less democratic. And when I talk about democratic, when Lessig talks about it, it's not about governmental systems or anything like that. It means access, the ability to have access to something, the ability to make something, freely, without economic censors or economic gatekeepers, etc., etc. And that he was really just worried that we become less musical. And guess what? We went from being a culture where we made music, we were musical, we learned how to read sheet music, to people who would sit down and, drink soda and listen to trap music in our, pods in our head, eating a bag of chips. That's very different. He was worried about that. And I think that's fascinating. So he's mad about his work being copied and not being paid. Eventually, they did get paid, and composers do get paid. But he was more worried about us just becoming consumers. And that gets us to, what Lessig talks about, the differences between read-write cultures and read-only cultures. Read-write cultures are basically this. Consumption is the starting point of production. It's the culture we live in now. It's where, we are allowed to comment back. We can say something on social media. We can comment on YouTube. We can download a YouTube video and remix it in some sort of way. Basically, we are not just passive dolt consumers. And not only that, can we make this stuff? We can distribute it online and people can see it. We can add to the past. We can recreate culture, right? And basically how it works is it's a many-to-many model, meaning creativity and content comes from all of us. We're all constantly making and remaking stuff. And it's just how we are. Nothing is set in stone. Nothing is final, okay? It's non-professional culture, right? Like, we can all make music. We all, with a smartphone, can make movies. We are all photographers now. We're all, news people. We're all experts and shit, No, we're fucking idiots, but, we all think we're really good at stuff because we have a phone. But anyways, we can at least do stuff. We can partake. And people could not partake for the longest time throughout basically most of the 1900s. The 1900s are what he called read-only culture, right? You simply consumed. You bought a record and you listened to it. Now listen, I'm a hip-hop head, you know what I'm saying? And hip-hop changed that model. They took what John Philip Sousa was worried about, the turntable, right? And they started to figure out, hip-hop DJs, these kids in the South Bronx figured out how they could take, 2 copies of the same record with a short, 2 or 4 bar drum break on it, or rhythmic section, or any type of section, and they used 2 copies of the same record with 2 turntables, and they could extend that infinity. They could make the loop. They could remix live in front of your face using those infernal machines that John Philip Sousa said would only make us consumers. They undermined how we were supposed to use turntables, which is put on a record, sit back, drink your soda, enjoy. They changed that. They undermined the model. But anyways, that was an exception to the rule. But hip-hop to me in many ways was like the first form of read-write popular culture, right? I'll talk about that later in this class. But with the read-only culture, you can't add to it. You can't add to the past, like where people would see it. Yeah, you could buy a book and write something in the margins of the book that you owned, and maybe you wrote it in library books and people could read it. But it's very different than like people like seeing what you said and you then like downloading someone's video and like breaking down what they're saying and then like uploading it, whatever. So like you're always adding to culture, but with a read only, you're just consuming it. It's the mass media model, one to many. A news company, a record label, a Hollywood studio, they make something, we watch it, we consume it, we read it, and that's it. That's where it extends. We're just consumers. But under read-write, and that's been, bolstered by the access we have to computers and computing technologies, to the internet, to software like Adobe Premiere or Final Cut and Photoshop and all these apps that allow us to manipulate images and video and sound and filters and all this stuff, right? Culture is no longer professionalized. It is, it is, but like we are doing shit with it and we are flipping it and we're putting it out there into the world and we're making the dope stuff. Sorry companies, sorry Disney, sorry, Nike, whoever, like the dope shit comes from us and how we take what you make and we do something different with it. That's really, how it be working now. But the mass media model is you just consume. The read-write model is, and the way you can think about this differently is this. If you ever get a Word document, most likely that's a read-write document, right? Someone sends you a Word document, you can type stuff into it, it's read-write. You get an MP3, a PDF, right? Typically, now obviously you can add things to a PDF, but you can't really go in and change the text necessarily, right? Unless, there's layers or whatever. But typically a PDF is read only. You can only read it. You cannot add to it. You cannot change it in any sort of way. Now Lessig, excuse me, Lessig also wants to reiterate, and I want to reiterate too, that this is not just like a way of doing or a way of consuming. This is a way of thinking. And this has drastically changed. We thought as just simple, basic consumers. We bought stuff made at the corporate level and we were happy with consuming it in some way, right? Now we're active consumers, right? Like we buy and we're empowered consumers and we do stuff and we make stuff and we challenge, those things. And the companies don't like that. They want us to be passive adults. But in that, it's an idea too. Read-write culture is an idea in our head. Read-only culture is an idea that's created and put into our heads. That's very important to understand, right? That things with like copyright and copyleft, all that is just ideas, that have been put into us about ideas. So anyways, I hope you're not totally confused. But I just wanted to kind of talk about ideas a little bit and give, intellectual property rights and laws and just kind of give us some of the basic nuts and bolts. And I want you to further think about some of this stuff. And as we move into our next modules, we'll really get into like specific things like copyright, trademark, patent, fair use, remixing broadly, sampling in music, sampling in fashion, patents in pharmaceuticals, and all that stuff. So we'll move through those things, but I just want us to think about ideas and remixing in these sort of cultures, these corporate, legal, and consumer, prosumer, subcultural cultures, etc., etc. So anyway, stew on that, ruminate,